New Mexico. It's known as the land of enchantment, but its history is one of the most complex and often brutal of any state in the Union. Most people think the story of the American West starts with cowboys and gold mines in California, but the real history of this land is much older, much bloodier, and way more complicated than what you saw in old movies. If you want to see the place where the very first humans in North America left their footprints, and where the world's first atomic bomb changed everything forever, you have to look at New Mexico. This isn't just a desert with some nice sunsets. It is a place where different worlds have been crashing into each other for thousands of years, and honestly, it's a miracle the state even exists today. In this video, we are going on a massive journey through time. We are going to look at the mysterious ancient people who built apartment buildings in the sides of cliffs and then vanished. We will talk about the Spanish explorers who marched across the desert looking for cities made of literal gold, only to find something they didn't expect. We will cover the biggest indigenous uprising in history that actually kicked Europeans out of the region for a decade, and how a teenage outlaw named Billy the Kid became the most famous face of the Wild West. By the time we get to the secret labs of the 1940s and the strange lights in the sky over Roswell, you'll see why New Mexico is one of the most misunderstood parts of the map. Human history in New Mexico goes back over 10,000 years. The earliest known inhabitants were the Clovis and Folsom people, named for the sites where their distinct stone tools were discovered. The story starts a long time ago. We are talking about 13,000 years back. While most of the world was still dealing with the end of the Ice Age, people were already living in New Mexico. We know this because of things found near places like Clovis and Folsom. These early humans were hunting massive animals like mammoths and giant bison using stone spear points that were incredibly well made. Imagine trying to take down a hairy elephant with nothing but a sharp rock and a lot of courage. That was daily life in New Mexico back then. As the climate changed and the big animals died out, the people stayed and adapted. They started farming corn, beans, and squash. Around 1,000 years ago, a group we now call the Ancestral Puebloans created something mind-blowing in a place called Chaco Canyon. They built great houses, which were basically the first skyscrapers of North America. One of them, Pueblo Bonito, had over 600 rooms and stood 5 stories tall. They didn't have wheels, horses, or metal tools, yet they aligned these buildings perfectly with the sun and the stars. Then around the year 1300, a massive drought hit. The people left their great stone cities and moved toward the Rio Grande River, becoming the ancestors of the Pueblo people who still live in New Mexico today. Fast forward to 1540. Spanish explorer Francisco Coronado and his crew marched north from Mexico City, lured by rumors of 7 cities made of gold. They found the Zuni Pueblos instead, sparking a series of brutal clashes that forever changed the region's landscape. The next big shift happened in the 1500s. Imagine you are a Spanish explorer in Mexico City, and you hear rumors of the 7 cities of Cibola, where the streets are paved with gold and the walls are covered in jewels. In 1540, a man named Francisco Coronado took a huge army and marched north to find it. When he got to New Mexico, he didn't find gold. He found people living in mud brick houses who just wanted to be left alone. Coronado was frustrated, and his expedition was pretty much a violent disaster. He went back to Mexico empty-handed, but the Spanish didn't give up on the region. Decades later, in 1598, Juan de Oñate came up to stay. He brought settlers, sheep, cattle, and horses. This changed the landscape forever. But Oñate was also very cruel to the local people. He demanded food and labor from the Pueblos, and if they resisted, the punishment was terrifying. This created a huge amount of tension. The Spanish were trying to force their religion and their government onto people who had been living there for centuries. It was a pressure cooker waiting to explode. Pope, a religious leader from San Juan Pueblo, coordinated a secret uprising. Runners traveled between villages with knotted ropes, signaling the day of the attack. On August 10, 1680, the Puebloans revolted, killing over 400 Spanish settlers and driving the rest all the way back to El Paso. By this time, the Pueblo people had had enough. They were being worked to death, their traditional ceremonies were banned, and a massive drought was making everyone starve. A man named Pope from Oke Owinge Pueblo came up with a secret plan. He sent runners to all the different villages carrying knotted ropes. Each knot represented a day. When the last knot was untied, everyone would attack at once. It worked perfectly. They caught the Spanish totally off guard. They burned down the missions and drove the Spanish settlers all the way back down to what is now El Paso, Texas. For 12 years, New Mexico was ruled by the indigenous people again. It is one of the only times in history that native people successfully kicked out a European colonial power and kept them out for over a decade. The Spanish did eventually come back in 1692, but they realized they couldn't be as harsh as they were before. They had to learn to live alongside the Pueblo people, creating a unique mix of cultures that defines the state today. Things stayed relatively quiet for a while under Spanish rule, but then everything changed in 1821 when Mexico won its independence from Spain. Suddenly, New Mexico wasn't a closed-off colony anymore. They opened up trade with the United States through the Santa Fe Trail. Traders would bring wagons full of cloth, tools, and guns from Missouri all the way to Santa Fe. This brought in a lot of money, but it also brought in a lot of Americans who wanted the land for themselves. In 1846, the Mexican-American War broke out. General Stephen Kearny marched into Santa Fe and basically told everyone that the United States owned the place now. There wasn't much of a fight in the capital, but there was a violent revolt in Taos shortly after. By 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, and New Mexico officially became a territory of the U.S. But it didn't become a state right away. It took 64 years of fighting in Congress before people in the East would accept New Mexico as a state. New Mexico was the very epitome of the Wild West. This was the era of legendary figures like Henry McCarty, better known as Billy the Kid, and the lawman who eventually tracked him down, Pat Garrett. This was the era of the real Wild West. You had the Lincoln County War, which was basically a giant fight between two groups of businessmen over who got to sell beef to the army. A young man named Henry McCarty, better known as Billy the Kid, got caught in the middle of it. He became a legend for his escapes and his skill with a gun, eventually being hunted down by Sheriff Pat Garrett. During this time, the railroad finally arrived, which changed everything. Suddenly, you didn't have to spend months on a wagon to get there. Tourists started coming to see the exotic desert. Fred Harvey built fancy hotels called Harvey Houses along the tracks, and the Harvey girls provided high-class service in the middle of the dusty frontier. Finally, in 1912, New Mexico was admitted to the Union as the 47th state. People celebrated, but the biggest changes were still to come. New Mexico was home to the world's biggest secret, the Manhattan Project. At Los Alamos, the brightest minds raced to build the atomic bomb. In 1945, the Trinity test changed everything, launching the nuclear age. During World War II, the government needed a place that was isolated, sparsely populated, and easy to keep secret. They chose a boys' school on a plateau called Los Alamos. Some of the smartest scientists in the world, led by J. Robert Oppenheimer, moved there to build the first atomic bomb. The locals had no idea what was happening behind the fences. On July 16, 1945, at the Trinity site in the southern part of the state, the world's first nuclear device was detonated. The flash was so bright it could be seen hundreds of miles away. It turned the desert sand into green glass. This event ended World War II, but also started the Cold War. New Mexico became a hub for high-tech research, national labs, and military bases. To this day, the state is a leader in space and physics research. Since 1947, the town of Roswell has been linked to legends of aliens and crashed UFOs. But beyond the mysteries, New Mexico became a haven for artists like Georgia O'Keeffe, whose work captured the land's stark, vibrant soul. Today, it remains a place where ancient traditions and cutting-edge science live side by side, truly earning its name, the Land of Enchantment. After the war, New Mexico took a strange turn into pop culture. In 1947, something crashed in a rancher's field near Roswell. The military said it was a weather balloon, but many people believed it was a UFO. Whether you believe in aliens or not, Roswell became the alien capital of the world, drawing in millions of tourists. At the same time, artists like Georgia O'Keeffe were showing the world the beauty of the New Mexico landscape. Her paintings of bleached bones and red hills made people see the desert as a place of spiritual beauty rather than just a wasteland. Today, Santa Fe is one of the biggest art markets in the world. People come from everywhere for the chili. Whether you want it red or green, the unique adobe architecture, and the blend of Spanish, Native American, and Anglo traditions that you can't find anywhere else. From the first mammoth hunters to the scientists at Los Alamos, New Mexico has always been a place where people pushed the boundaries of what was possible. It's a land that has survived droughts, wars, and social upheavals, yet it keeps its soul intact. It's not just a place on the map, it's a living history book that is still being written every single day.